This is the Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program, interviewing Mrs. Edward Allen, at her home, 195 Northeast Street, Wabash. No, I'll just hold this in my lap here, and you and I can just chat. Are you comfortable now? Okay. All you have to do is just talk normal, and you and I will discuss. First of all, I'm going to ask you about yourself, and tell me about when you were born and where and who your parents were. And of course, you've just pointed out to me that I'm interviewing you in the home that you were born in. So why don't you give me some of the background?
Well, I went to my parents were Thomas and Francenia Laughery, Jester. And I was born March the 10th, 1899. I attended East Ward School and Wabash High School for 3 years. A sad mistake of my life was not finishing my senior year at high school. But I wanted to switch over to a business course. I still do not understand algebra and geometry. And I asked to switch over to commercial arithmetic. And they refused because they said I'd signed up for the academic course, and that's what I had to finish. Nowadays, they can mix in the different courses, which is much better, I think, because I have always regretted that I didn't get that high school diploma. I attended the Wabash Christian Church, and I've been a member there most of my life. I started the Sunday school when I was 3 years old and had a perfect attendance record for 15 years up until the time I was married. Marriage can put a stop to lots of things. I had a family. I married Edward Allen November the 5th, 1919. We had a family of Richard E. Allen, and he was born October the 13th, 1920. My daughter Ruth was born September the 12th, 1922. My mother passed away in the next few years, so I didn't have another child until after she had passed away, and Edwina was born March the 18th, 1926. I hope I got them all right.
Yeah, well, if we don't, we can correct it. Yeah.
My family all attended East Ward School, and the two girls finished high school. They, junior high, they went to junior high down where the old high school used to be. Richard did not go on through high school. He said he had to stay in school till he was 16. He'd just hang around down there at junior high till he could quit. He was just no student. Let's see.
Why don't we talk about, let's talk about your parents, about your mother and father and what they did and so forth, and living up here in the East End. Would you feel more comfortable if you lean back?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, you might. Okay. Don't want to knock your pictures over there.
My father and mother were married in 1880, November the 9th, 1880. In their first few years of married life, they lived in around Treaty and La Fountain, and my mother was, my mother's mother, my grandmother, on my mother's side, was Sarah Walgamuth.
How do you spell it?
Wohlgamuth.
Walgamuth, yes, okay.
George Walgamuth was the first postmaster at Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was, let's see, Aunt Becky Waldemuth, and Uncle Bill Waldemuth, and George Waldemuth all lived together out at Treaty, and the home place is still out there. It was just east of the Treaty store, when the Treaty store was out there at one time. Then my father was no farmer. So every time the big four would go through the past where he would be out in the field, he'd drop the lines and run to watch the train go by. He came home one evening and said, well, we're moving to Wabash. That was way before I was born. And he became a baggageman and freight man down at the, what they called the Big Four, New York Central, I guess, but they called it Big Four then. I just don't know how many years he was there, and then he transferred up to the Wabash Railroad as freight man and baggageman. Let's see. My mother passed away in April 1924. After she passed away, my father married again, Rose Richards. My father passed away in 1932, May of 1932. I had 2 children to be in the service. Richard left in December of 1942 and was soon over in the Pacific. We never saw him from the day that he left until he returned home in December of 1945. He had started on his 4th year. My daughter Ruth joined the Waves. In fact, she was the first wave from Wabash or Wabash County to go into the Waves, and she was gone from 1943 until December 1945. I also had a nephew that was in the service and had almost finished 20 years. He was the first one to come back to Wabash in 1945, then Ruth, and then Richard. Ruth had married Gerald Dawes in 1943, and he was also in the service. He didn't get home until January of 1946. He was over in the Pacific too. What else do you want to know?
Well, let's go. We're going to go back now. Tell me about your grandparents that you remember, on either your mother's side or your father's side.
Well, I came along too late in life to know any of them. They were all gone when I was born. But my mother's grandmother was Sarah Waldemuth, of the Waldemuth family out at Treaty. And there has been quite a bit of history about them, but I just never got to see them in person. I mean, just from what I have been told and pictures.
And how about on your father's side?
My father was born in North Carolina and came to Indiana when he was 3 years old. And I think that they settled down around Westfield and Noblesville and down in that direction. Let's see, his mother was Rebecca Pondexter Truelove Jester. She'd been married before. And all in all, there was quite a few children, stepchildren, half brothers and sisters. Quite a conglomeration. My daughter Edwina has been working on a family history in the last couple of years, and it has been a very interesting family to trace. She was around in Westfield, going through an old cemetery, trying to find Jacob and Rebecca Jester's graves. When she got there, it seemed like they were tearing up the cemetery to make it into a parking lot or something. And there were a pile of old stones there, and she got permission to look through there and found my grandfather Jester's stone. But they couldn't locate Rebecca, but they were both buried there. And she got permission to bring that stone home with her. If you knew my Edwina, she'd attempt anything to get what she wanted to find out.
Yeah. How was it living up here in the east end of Wabash in those days?
This was a railroad.
When you were a child, yeah. Tell us about that.
This was a railroad end of town. And, such good neighbors and good workers. And this end of town has really changed in the last few years. It isn't anything like it used to be. But I feel like I got to stay right here with it.
Yeah. What, were there some grocery stores? Tell me about the grocery.
Yes. Rogies, the grocery, is up here on the corner of Walnut and East. Johnny Young was over on Spring Street. John Grossenbarker had a little store up on Washington Street. And then in later years, Deggering's over on Allen Street and Chronister's further up on Spring Street. And I really myself miss the little neighborhood grocery. In fact, I don't suppose I could get out to them anymore since my sickness in 72. I've been house grounded, you might say.
Yeah. When you were young, what kind of transportation did your parents have?
Walk.
Walk.
Yeah. And we never owned a car. Mr. Allen and I never owned a car. Eddie got to ride a lot with other people because he was in the entertainment business, and somebody always had to take him.
Yeah.
One winter, it was so severe, and my Sunday school record, and my father and I were the only two that attended Sunday school that morning. But he was determined I wasn't going to lose my record.
Yeah. You mean even Homer Showalter didn't show up?
I guess not. That's what I've always been told. But, we were the only two that got to Sunday school that morning.
Yeah.
Homer was a good, steady attendant too.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
This is the same house that you were born in that we're sitting in here today.
That's right.
And tell me what it was when your mother and father were living, and what was the house like, and did you have brothers and sisters and so forth?
My mother had 7 children. I was number 7. None of them lived except an old sister that was 9 years older than I. I have a picture there that, excuse me.
Describe that now.
The doll cart was given to me by Grandma Mellon that lived over across the street, and she was crippled up with a fracture of some kind, and she just pushed it to me across the floor. I went over there and she just pushed it to me. My sister was 9 years older than I. You can see the difference there. This old cherry tree, I had a rope swing. And Homer Goodlander had told me in later years how he came by one day. I think he delivered milk. And I had gone around and round and round in that swing, and it was clear up to my neck. And he thought I was going to choke myself, and he ran up in the yard and got me untwisted. The cherry tree there is not, in this picture, is not the same one we have now, because Eddie and I planted a yellow cherry tree in the same location.
Mm-hmm.
I.
Your father was working on the railroad in those days?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Did he finish his career working on the railroad and get a pension and everything?
No. He started ailing, and Lee Jeffries from the Wabash Cabinet came to offer him a job as shipping clerk from his knowledge of checking baggage and loading freight. And they waited until he was able to get on the job, and he spent his last years in working in the shipping department at Wabash Cabinet number 1.
Yeah.
Years and years before the railroad, he worked at a furniture factory, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember taking his lunch to him,
Mm-hmm.
but that's been a long time ago.
Yeah.
Whether that was before he was on the railroad a while or after he was on the railroad a while. I just don't remember, but I do remember taking his lunch to him.
Yeah. Did your mother, was she a outstanding cook or seamstress or anything that you remember?
Seamstress.
Yeah. Can you remember anything in particular that she made or was particularly good at?
Well, she sewed a lot for the colored people, and those colored people just really almost worshipped her because she would sew for them.
Mm-hmm.
And she figured their money was as good as anybody else's, and they used to bring the most wonderful material for her to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And she could just get something big out of a small amount of material. She had that knack to make them material go a long ways.
Uh-huh.
And that is how I got my music lessons.
Mm-hmm.
This Aunt Becky Waldman had left my sister and I a little inheritance. And after folks had an organ, but I went as far as I could on the organ. Then on my 14th birthday, we sent for a Cornish piano in Orange, New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And Ed McInerney delivered it to us with his, I don't know whether he had his horse and dray yet or when he first got his new truck.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother was determined I was going to learn to play. It took about 3 attempts.
Uh-huh.
After I got older and went to birthday parties and church programs and so forth, I got kind of ashamed of myself that I couldn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I came home one day. I said, I'll try again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a big thrill for her when I could sit down and play especially the church hymns that she likes so well.
Mm-hmm. Who was your teacher?
Miss Alda Mercer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've always appreciated that I had the ability not to go too far in music, but sit down just for my own enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
Since I'm older, I really enjoy sitting down and playing the church hymns and the pieces I played and the sheet music that Eddie taught me to learn to play.
Yeah. So she decided that you were going to play the piano, and she took in sewing and bought you a piano.
No, the piano was from this, from what Aunt Becky had left Elsie and I.
Oh, I see, yeah.
It was my own money.
Yeah, oh, I see. Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah.
It was a gift from this great aunt. It was my mother's aunt,
Yeah.
Rebecca Waldman.
Yeah. How did your mother ever get the idea that you should play the piano?
Well, I guess she just wanted me to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe she had much chance to take up music, and I believe she did kind of play a guitar a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But as I say, I came along so late in life, I don't know much of the early days.
Yeah. What happened to your older sister then?
Well, she married and separated.
What was her name? Her
Her
first name?
Elsie.
Elsie. Uh-huh.
And she was the type of girl that kind of just wanted to live her own life and wouldn't agree to stay at home and live the life that the folks wanted her to. So she just kind of went on her own. And she passed away in 1962 in Vanderhook, BC, Canada. And was buried up there. She was married again. She liked to travel.
Well, be darned. That's unusual that you drift all the way up into British Columbia.
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't find out she had passed away till almost a year afterwards. And I didn't get a birthday card from her that in 62. And I inquired of the postmaster up there, and he had given my letter to a neighbor. And she wrote back and said, well, she supposed her husband had let me know, but he hadn't. So that's how I found out. I feel bad about her being buried away up there, but I guess that's what made her happy. So.
How old were your parents then? I was asking you how old your parents were when they died, and figured it out for me here.
Well, my father was still 75. He'd have been 76 in October. And my mother was still 65. She would have been on 66 in May. She was born in May.
So you were almost raised then as an only child, with an older sister being so much older than you.
I thought it'd be nice to have brothers and sisters, but I guess it wasn't supposed to be that way.
Tell me about the Christian church in the early days when you were a kid, and about the ministers, and about the Sunday school, and things that you remember.
I was in the primary class, and Mrs. M.R. Gardner was my teacher in the primary class. It wasn't anything in those days like it is now, since it's been remodeled and added to and so forth. But I still believe we got more out of it in those days than you get out of church and Sunday school nowadays. I'm positive of that. And as I said before, I had quite a Sunday school record. Up until the time I was married, I had a 15-year record.
What was it like to go to church on Sunday? The start of the day.
Well, you got up Sunday morning. You took your bath Saturday night. Sunday morning, you got up and you went to church and you went to Sunday school. You went to Sunday school first and then church. And you had to behave yourself. You couldn't sit there and giggle and laugh and carry on and be all right and making pictures and so forth. You had to sit there and listen. I remember so well one time my mother my sister telling me about one time or other that she kind of wasn't behaving and they smacked her, and you could hear it all over the church. Those are the days you behaved. And it wouldn't hurt for them to start that kind of training nowadays.
When you went to Sunday school, and then did usually the children go on to church with their parents?
That's right, and you sat with them.
And how long would the services last in those days?
Oh, anyway, an hour and sometimes longer. My folks are great on entertaining the new ministers that came. That was what they did in those days. And when Frankie James came to Wabash, I remember my mother always got most of her dinner ready on Sunday. She only had a wood cook stove, but she could really make a good meal on that old stove. Anyway, we were walking home, and after we walked those days. After we got home, Mr. James said to my mother, "Well, Mother, what'd you think of my preaching?" And my mother was very outspoken. She always said just exactly what she thought. She said, "Well, when you get done prancing around and stop catching flies and get down to business, you give a good sermon." And Dr. James is the one that married Eddie and I.
Well, he stayed here a long time, so he must have taken someone's advice.
And Dr. Jane baptized me too. I was about 14, I think, when I was baptized. And I've always enjoyed being connected with the church and being active in the church. And after Eddie passed away, I started in again and had almost 5 more years added to my record when I got stopped in my tracks. And now I'm mostly shut in.
We're going to talk about some of the things that have happened and so forth. Do you remember much about the Ku Klux Klan in Wabash?
That just came in shortly, I believe, after we were married.
That would have been 1926 was the big
No,
time.
We were married in 1919.
Well,
I think I was around in the 20s.
Yeah.
I don't remember too much about that because I wasn't too much interested in politics or anything like that. But old Mr. Pepley, if you remember,
Which
he
one?
was Sherm.
Sure. Yeah.
He was sure against that Ku Klux Klan.
Against it?
Oh, yes. He just didn't have any, he just thought it was terrible for anything like that to be in Wabash. Well, that's about all I know about the Klan.
How did you know old Sherm Peffley?
Well, we lived through a depression of the 1930s, and it was up to me to kind of help with raising the family. So I wasn't equipped for office work or anything like that, but I had helped Mrs. Miser, Miss Blanche Miser, the Wabash tool machine. I had helped her when they first came to Wabash. And I went back to her and see if she needed help. And for many years, I went out every morning and helped her at the house there. Then others began to find out I would do that, and talk about not being able to find work, to me, is if you're willing to work, not a white-collar job, but downright hard work, there's always work you can find. And I said, well, I would help until the girls got through high school. Then I wasn't going to do it anymore. And I helped Mary Paul, and one day Mrs. Pepley came over and to see if I would help her. Well, that's how I got to know the Pepleys, and she was wonderful to work for. He was a character, but he was a good old fellow, and it was very amusing sometimes, his views about things.
Yes.
But he was really set in his ways.
What was he doing for a living then, Mr. Peffley?
Oh, they'd retired, but he always had a garden in the back of the yard there, and he just had customers for his onions and his asparagus and tomatoes, and he always had a nice big garden back there.
That was that house on Main Street? Well, I'm fortunate because when I met Sherm and his brother and his sister were still living when I moved there in 1958.
Well,
And of course, all of them died in their 90s.
yeah, I know.
And so I was privileged to know all of them, and I'm only sorry that I didn't take a picture of all of them with one of my kids, because it would have been about almost a span of 90 to 100 years.
I told Mrs. Pepley many a time, I said, well, you would have made someone a wonderful mother. I said, I don't know about Mr. Pepley. I imagine he'd been pretty strict. But she was a wonderful one, and he was too. You know, he could just tell you things that he's quite a reader, you know. Took the geographic magazines and so forth. And so after she passed away, he asked me if I would still continue to come help, you know. And I did until the sister and the brother moved in, and I knew I was going to have to give up that kind of work.
Did you help with the cooking?
No, he did the cooking.
Do you remember what kind of a range they had in that house?
Well, they had a gas range, not a new modern type, but an old gas range and a hot plate.
Right. When they died at 97 or whatever it was, that original Chambers range was still in the house and still being used.
Well,
A big, massive black and white range was still in that house.
He had a hot plate hooked up on the back porch, and
We were talking about
sister and brother moved in. The sister was very careless with the gas, but she didn't dare say anything to her or to him either. And one day the gas was so terrible strong, and I would notice, you know, that the burners would be on. Wouldn't be lit, but the key was turned. And I talked to, who was it? Knotts, that used to work at
Everett.
I talked to him one time. I said, don't you ever give me away, because he'd never forgive me. But I said, walk up someday, and it's like you stopped in for a visit, and see if you can't detect gas. Well, he did. And he made him disconnect that hot plate that he had out on the back porch. It was just rubber tubing. And I suppose he cautioned him about the burners, but I was so afraid they'd have an explosion or burn up or something, you know. But I knew he'd never forgive me if he found out I ever tried to get somebody to go see about it.
Well, let's talk about meeting your husband and his background and what went on and so forth. First of all, let's find out what his full name was and where and when he was born and his background up until the time you met him.
His name was Edward Allen. He was born December the 4th, 1887. He had always thought he was born in 1888. But when he had to check up for his Social Security, he had to write to New York and find out about his birth, and the church records showed that he was born in 1887. He was married to a New York girl, and they moved to Montreal, Canada. They had one child, Anna. And his wife passed away in 1918 during the flu epidemic. And after he brought his wife and child back to New York and buried his wife, he went to Detroit, where he had worked once before as a paper ruler. And paper ruling was his trade. The Wabash Cabinet Company, number 2, needed a paper ruler, and they sent to Detroit to some firm there that could recommend A1 paper ruler. They sent Eddie to Wabash.
Will you describe for me what a paper ruler is, as if I didn't know?
It's a ruling machine, and you have to set pens and mix up the inks for each of the whatever you're going to rule. You mix up the ink and the ruling machine, and it has to have a feeder. For Retta Slee was his feeder for many years down at the Wabash Cabinet Company, and she feeds that in, and he had to watch to see that all the lines were correct and the ink was feeding right and the colors are right and all that. And very intricate work, and hard on the eyes, a strain on the eyes.
Did you ever meet his parents?
No, his father was still living, but his mother had passed away rather young. But his father had made his home with him in Canada. Then, when he came back to New York, his father made his home with Eddie's sister in New York. I never met him and didn't get any pictures of his father or mother until many years later, when Eddie's brother-in-law and daughter and husband came to Wabash to visit us, and he brought us a picture of Eddie's father and mother.
What happened to the daughter then that he had?
She was raised in New York, And I never met her. I talked to her on the telephone, but I never made any trips. I was stayed at home. And I never met her until Eddie's funeral. And she and her husband came. So she is married and has family. But she didn't remember her mother because she was only about 18 months old, I think, when her mother passed away. But getting back to Wabash. He came to Wabash. I just think it was either it must have been the latter part of 1918 or early in 1919. And at that time, I happened to have taken the office boy's job down at Wabash Cabinet number 1. And I did all the errands. I did everything but drive the truck. I couldn't do that, but I did all my work on foot. And after Eddie came to Wabash, he would play the guitar and sing during the noon hour down there. And my father worked in the shipping department. And he just said to him, well, he says, sometime when you don't have anything to do, he says, come up to our house and spend the evening. He said, I have a daughter that plays the piano. Well, he came all right. And so we were married on November the 5th, 1919. My mother always said, well, your father's picked out his next son-in-law, whether you want him or not. So we had, we were married 47 and a half years when he passed away. He didn't quite make the 50.
All right, now, where did you set up housekeeping in?
Well, my folks had built another house at 191 Northeast Street. I think I was about 5 years old when they finished that house. And so we stayed there until they could get the renters out of this house for us to move in here. I've been here ever since.
Been here ever since. Well, that's nice.
So I've never lived anyplace else besides on this same lot. One house to the other.
Now tell me about Eddie's musical career and so forth.
Well, I just don't know too much about that. I just know he always was with a group to sing and was an entertainer, but I just wasn't cut out for that type of life, and I always just stayed at home. It's quite a thrill to hear all the good things, how people enjoyed him and all that. And he knew the older one, like Cantor and all those old timers, you know. Do you ever hear anything about Jimmy Durante anymore?
He's still alive.
Is he?
Yeah.
Well, I always kind of like Jimmy.
Now, Eddie played the banjo, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Now would
He'll have it.
yeah. Now would he go around and play just after work and things like that, or did he travel after he got married?
Well, he was. I think they organized the Entertainers Club after we were married, and then he was always with the group. Comedy 4 that they organized after they were in Wabash, after he was in Wabash.
Now you have to tell me who these people are.
This is Boob Small Street, Carmy Lane, Baldy Lane, Earl Dale, and Eddie.
And they were sort of...
they sang around and raised bonds, you know. They're still raising war bonds and all, not like that time. This is the one that he brought from Canada, a trio that he had in Canada. He was, his daughter said, "Oh, you look so young there," but I said he was about 31 or 32 then.
This was in 1918. It was the Allen Trio.
Yeah,
And,
Montreal, Canada.
Now, what were they traveling on Vaudeville or?
I imagine. Let's see. That broadcast over Fort Wayne.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just getting on top, and
Who were those?
Carney had been in the service and had been gassed. Well, they pulled him through several times to go on with the program, but this one evening they didn't make it.
Now, who are the men in this photograph?
Baldy Lane, I think his real name was Charlie, but they called him Baldy. Earl Dale, Carney Lane, and Eddie.
Yeah. This was taken during World War II?
Well, let's see, we were married in 1919, and they were broadcasting in the 31, I believe it was. Carney died in 1931.
Now this says the original 12-year Four Eagles radio and vaudeville stars, Eddie Allen, Carmy Lane, Charlie Lane, and Jack Dale. And 1931 this was in WOWO.
That's when Carney passed away. They had been broadcasting before that. That evening, Carney didn't make it. Now here's what they read over the radio that evening.
In 1926, yeah, what happened?
After Edwina was born, Eddie had an offer from Lasses White, Minstrels. He had an offer before that, but I said, well, you just wait until my mother is gone. She would never agree to anything like that, to, be gone like that. And then when I was expecting Edwina, I said, after this baby is born, then you can take up the offer. And so he joined Lasses White in 1926, and they were just going strong. They were 2 full seasons together. And the 3rd season, Lasses was just going to use a quartet, not this quartet, but a quartet in his group. And they had intended to go in and making movies, too. But, of course, 1929, you know what happened then. So he had to come home then, and that's when the Four Eagles got back together, and were just going so strong.
Lasses White was the big minstrel show of the day.
Algie Fields wasn't, and Lasses White. And it was quite a... now there's a letter that was 1920.
It says Lasses White's All-Star Minstrels, Columbia, South Carolina, December 26, 1927. They traveled right through the holidays and those
Oh,
things?
yeah, but he did get to come home before Christmas, but they worked on Christmas Day. And he usually was gone about 9 months out of the year when he was on the road. But then 1929 came along.
And that finished him off, the Depression.
Yeah, and then he got in his head, he wanted his own music business. But getting back to my childhood and what I grew up to enjoy and all was the old Chautauquas.
All right. Tell me about them.
I got to hear and see Helen Keller. I have a scrapbook with programs of those days. And ladies, there's a big heavy book over there.
Is this it?
Yep.
Okay.
I really should fix up a new one. And these are just programs of the days.
Well, listen, why don't you just look at the programs and tell me about the programs as you remember them. Now, going back, this says Yarnell Theater. I never...
Oh, where'd you see that?
One page back yet.
That's one of them piano recitals that I was in. Oh, Louisiana, Yarnell Theater, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this was...
Ladies' Aid, the Christian Church put on a play, I believe.
But I noticed the Yarnell Theater in Wabash, Indiana. Where would that have been?
Where the Eagles is.
Uh-huh. That's what it was called?
Uh-huh.
Well,
Yeah.
uh-huh.
And, in those days, I don't know, I don't suppose you remember Dr. Smith, where Hoover Minor...
He was the man without any legs?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What about him?
Well, his wife was in those plays. I know she was something or other, that she was the first one in the parade or performance or something or other. I can't see without my glasses, so I'll have to get that.
I'm going to have you repeat that. With Eddie playing in the Minstrels, did you ever see Lassus White's Minstrels?
Yeah, they were here, not the first season, but I think the second season. Mm-hmm. And I took Richard and Ruth, and we went. And Ruth, she piped out, "Hiya, Dad!"
Where did they play?
At the Eagles Theater. And of course, it was a minstrel show. They were all blacked up, and all. But they had to cut that out later on in years. That got so that was taboo. You couldn't black up and imitate colored people.
Uh-huh. Were there any people that became famous in the minstrels in those days that went on to become famous that he traveled with?
Well, as I said, I just wasn't with them much to know. Uh-huh. There was a band McAtee, yeah. There was one, Lassus, and Ben McAtee. Mm-hmm. Then Lassus and somebody else in the group came over to Nashville on the radio quite a bit. All I can remember about that fellow, they had to get him just about half drunk to be funny.
What
I've been told.
What kind of money did Eddie make in those days, and what would he send home and so forth?
To us, it was pretty good money then. $75 a week, and his traveling expenses paid, and so forth. And he would send me money home by telegram. Mm-hmm. That's when I had the telegraph service here. And we could save, and could save up enough for him to live through the summer till he went back the next season, you see.
What would he do in the summer when he came home?
Well, entertain as usual, and we always put out a big garden, and we would stay home quite a bit too, and just get ready to leave in the fall again. And let's see, it was in the paper one time that somebody had heard the quartet from Lassus White Minstrels open the radio station at Hot Springs, Arkansas, and that they would be on the next night. Well, I had a neighbor. I didn't have a radio then, but a neighbor did, Connie Garrison, if you know her, Everett Garrison's widow. But they lived up here, so we went over. I took all 3 kids and went over, and waited and waited and waited, and the babies were getting cross, and let's go home, Mom. And I was about ready just to pick up and come home. And then all of a sudden, Eddie was singing My Wild Irish Rose. Well, it just seemed like I could reach out and touch him. It was so clear and sounded so much like him, but I could tell they were tired. They always did that after the show, you see. And I said that was a thrilling moment for me in a way, because he was gone so much, and it just seemed like he's right there in the room all of a sudden. So radio is wonderful.
He must have been an Irish tenor then.
Yeah, top tenor. And,
but he also played the banjo.
Yeah, and guitar. It was a guitar when he first came, and he picked up the banjo after he came to Wabash. It was just natural in him. He didn't take lessons. And it was very heartbreaking when he got to the place where he couldn't sing anymore. That's what went first, his voice. Then he just couldn't play anymore, and Ruth asked him a question one day when she was home, and about music, about something about music. He just shook his head. It's all Greek to me. It just all left him. He took it all with him. So I don't know whether I'm going to have any banjo players, or Ruth would have liked to have been a girl singer in a band, but I kind of didn't want that. I said one entertainer in the family was enough.
Let's look at the Chautauqua programs now and comment on some of the Chautauqua programs here in Wabash.
Well, of course, I was very thrilled to get to see Helen Keller.
What did she say when she was here?
Well, just her teacher was with her, Ann Sullivan, was that her name? And she did most of the explaining, and Helen would talk. It was before she got, to do too good at talking, but she could talk. And of course, we had these programs down at the pavilion, down at the city park, and usually just when the interesting moment, a train had come by and drowned it out. But, I got to hear lots of good programs. There's a picture of the Sunday school at one time.
That's Christian Church.
Uh-huh. Well, I know. I got her in
I think
there.
maybe we're too far ahead in the book, aren't we?
Oh. Some motion picture actors and actresses. I enjoyed this Royal Male Quartet quite a bit.
Did they play here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Royal Male Quartet. Then there was a quartet, all ladies orchestra. That was down at the park. Helen Keller and Mrs. Macy.
That was her teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was Monday, August 9th, and we don't have a date on that, do we? Helen Keller? Oh.
Let's see. Well, this could be around 1915, I imagine.
Let me see here. Oh, you pulled it right there. I can just look at it.
The book's getting pretty. Would that be when she was listed, ladies?
Well, that's okay. Back up and see if you can find some more for me. I think it's fun to go through old scrapbooks.
If you could hunt up some real good old coin dealers, Catherine Ramsey, in her, what she call her column, Lantern, she interviewed Eddie, and she wrote up quite a story about Eddie back in those days. And one year, Eddie and Harold Wiles and was there Raz Gidley and his wife, Seabury Gill and his wife. They all loaded up in one car and headed for New York. And I said, when they went around the corner here, the tail end of that car was really a dragon. I thought, well, will you ever get there or will you ever get back? And they took a picture of Seabury Gill sitting on a rocking chair. They all stayed at Eddie's sister's. And they took a picture of Seabury Gill, policeman from Wabash, on the sidewalks of New York.
Why didn't you go?
Well, that's what Anna's husband said. How come you never came to New York? I said, well, for the simple reason there was never enough money for both of us to go. I felt like it was his privilege to go because that was his home. I never left my home, so I just always let him go.
You seem to be a rather unusual individual in that you let Eddie take off for 2 years in the Minstrels, and you had 2 or 3 children, and you let him go to New York to visit his sister with a bunch of your neighbors, and you must have had a rather unusual disposition.
Well, I don't know. I always tried to do what I thought was the right thing to do. And I did work down at Honeywell's for about 3 months, and there's a lady next to me worked down there, and I just didn't like her. I went to Kenneth Roby. I said, could I be moved someplace else? I just don't like to listen to her talk. She was trying to put ideas in my head what all men did when they were out and gone. I said, well, we both trust each other, and I just don't want to listen to your talk. And he did. He put me over by another group. Of course, Kenneth Roby is a little relation in a way, by marriage. His wife was a Kerr, and that was some relation on my father's side. And so that was another experience in my life when I know why I had to go to work that winter. Eddie was to leave to go on another entertainment job someplace or other, and a pear tree out here, time to pick the pears. Well, I went and borrowed a big long ladder for him around Ed Persian, and we put the ladder up, and the ladder started to move. Instead of him hanging on to the ladder, he jumped and landed on that brick walk out there on this one heel. Well, he couldn't get up. And I didn't realize he couldn't at first. I said, well, get up on your feet. I said, you'll never get pears picked there on the walk. And, well, he says, I can. And he turned as white as a sheet. Well, he had jammed I had to call the doctor, and he had jammed his heel bone. And they were just ready to come through, you know. And, well, I knew right away I'd have to find something to do, because we just depended on what he brought in. And I went down to Honeywell's and talked to Kenneth Roby, and he put me to work. Oh, boy, working for that steel lamination, oh, my fingers started to bleed, you know. But, you know, I enjoyed it. It was an eye-opener to me what went on in factories. And a few times I worked a little overtime, and boy, that night force. I said, Eddie said, well, you act like you enjoy it. I said, well, I'm sure of seeing and learning things that I never knew before. And then they laid off at Honeywell's, and I went over to where my father and Eddie had worked, and I talked to Flora Hartcar, and she was a floor lady. Oh, I said, no use they're not taking anybody on. And I said, well, I just think I'll go over and talk to Mr. Robinson. Boy, did I ever step on her toes. She didn't like that a bit, but I went over and explained the situation to Mr. Robinson and said, well, when do you want to start? Well, Flora never liked me after that.
Did you ever see Mark Honeywell when you were working at Honeywell?
I'm just not sure. I really didn't know the man. I did see him. One of my highlights in my life was keeping my 1917 class together. And when I was invited down to the city park, and the girls of the class had a picnic dinner down there. And I thought, well, why don't they ever have the boys? Why don't they all get together? Well, we had one or two in there that I just didn't want to have anybody know how old they were, and they didn't want the boys in with it. So I just, after that was the 25th, I thought, I'm going to try and get them together. And I didn't know whether I'd be a success or not. Miss Blaney said, I don't believe you'll ever be able to make it. Others told me it just won't work. But you know, I did a lot of writing and tried to make it sound interesting and all that. And Henrietta Wassman never did forgive me. It made her so mad. But she came, and that we had the first one. That would have been our 30th. That'd been 1947, I believe, at the Christian Church. And I just said, well, I have found out that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, we met every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I usually did all the writing. But 67 would have been our 50th, and Eddie was slipping around fast, and I just had to turn it over to somebody else. But I just always felt like the old mother hen of that class, and I still hear from my freshman German teacher, Jean Anderson, down at Hanover, and I got a Christmas.
So this is a picture of what?
That's Eddie.
And
1922.
1922.
Is there a date
Right
on it?
on the bottom, it says
well,
1922.
could have been. And this is when he was still in Canada.
1918.
And this is part of the tour. That lady there.
He was a handsome-looking man.
That's what I always said. I got the best.
You know, he kept his hair right up to the end too.
Yes, he did. He
turned white, but he kept it.
Well, he turned gray when he was young yet, in his 30s. But
well, tell me about this class of 1917. You kept the class together, and still you didn't graduate.
no, I didn't graduate. I've always thought, oh, I'm going to take some of those night classes and do it yet. And I told Ewell Carpenter one time, I said, can't you fix me up a fake diploma?
Did you miss the last year altogether?
Yeah. I went down to sign up. I signed up for my annual, already had my ring, and my pen, and I just begged them to let me switch over to commercial arithmetic. Maybe that would have been harder than I figured it was going to be, but I just could not take any more geometry and algebra. And I believe Mr. Neighbors would have weakened, but who was principal then?
Was it Darnell in those days?
No, he moved out in California. Anyway, he said, no, you signed up for the academic course, and that's what you got to finish. Well, I showed him. I went to the locker and got my books and come home.
Do you still write to your children or talk to them on the phone or what?
Oh, yes, I hear from them by mail and by telephone. And then in 1972, when Dr. Frank was releasing me from the hospital, I had to make a choice of going home with Edwina to Lebanon, Ohio, or go to a nursing home. Well, I didn't want any nursing home. I didn't want to go home with her either. Well, he said, why are you so reluctant to go home with your daughter? I said, for the simple reason I got a home of my own right down the street here. But I went, and I stayed, and December the 27th, 72, till June the 7th, 73. And I kept losing weight, and I really got frightened. I felt like I was either starving to death or something, you know. And she took me into the doctor, to her doctor, and he checked me over and all that. And he said, well, you're not going to be with us long if we can't find something to perk you up. Boy, I came up for air. I said, well, if I'm that near death, you're not sending me home in a box. I'm going home. He looked at me, and one of the tears was rolling down her cheeks, and he said, you want to go where the box is, huh? But anyway, he prescribed what he had prescribed for his own mother, and it's a powder sustagen, and it's a food supplement. You mix it up with either water or 2% milk or skim milk. Well, I prefer just the plain water. You know, just a glass or two of that, and it did the trick. So I stayed. Edwina did bring me home in April, but I wasn't able to be left alone yet. But what I came home to, the vandalism around here, I said, well, if I don't get home pretty soon, I won't have anything left. So I told her, and her doctor said, now you're going to worry her by being so determined to go home. Well, I told her, I said, Edwina, I'll go back and stay with you until school's out. Then I've been home ever since then. I get the Meals on Wheels.
Your other daughter now, where is she living?
Well, they live over on Warren Railroad. It's just a few miles south of Mount Etna. But she has had another nervous breakdown, and she's in the Veterans Hospital at Downey, Illinois now, again. It's the second time she's been there. So I hear from her that how long whether they can get her back to normal again or not. You just never know.
Now tell me, how about Mr. Allen, then, his health? Did they keep up with the lining? He kept up with lining, or whatever you call that, all the way up until the end, didn't he?
No, I just forget. I think around the 1950, must have been around late in the 59 or early 60s. He just give it up. They weren't getting the work anyway, and he had his business, and he just thought he could make it with the business, and just gave that up. I never forgave him for doing that. I wanted him to stick to it, But anyway, I always let him do whatever he figured he wanted to do. And so he just started the repair business besides selling instruments and the like, and that's where he made his mistake. That was too hard to work. People are pushing and wanting it right now, and well, he couldn't even sit down and eat a meal. What they'd be calling or coming or over there ringing the bell and the like, and he was finally, his health just finally broke. And I think if he'd never taken up that repair work, maybe he'd still be here. I just look at Butch Howard every morning. I was starting down the street, and Butch makes me think of Eddie. Mm-hmm. And I just think, well, good old Butch. I said, there you are, going to work again.
Yeah, 82, 83 or something.
Well, I believe when nomination time, I read 18-year-old was running against an 85.
Well, maybe it is.
Eddie would be, this coming December the 4th, he'd be 88.
88.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me something, that someday your grandchildren or someone or great-grandchildren will be listening to this tape. You got anything that you would like to say, or having some deep, dark secret or something?
Heck no, I don't have no secrets.
Yeah.
Always right out in the open.
Right out in the open, that's good.
Well, I have a grandson. Edwina's oldest boy is in the Navy. And Edwina's only daughter married a soldier boy, and they're living in Germany. And then I just had a new great-grandson, Richard's boy. Richard had his second boy, January the 20th. And I just hope I live long enough to see if another banjo player is among the group.
I think something remarkable about you is that you not only keep your disposition and everything, your cheerful outlook on life, but doggone it, you don't have much gray hair.
Don't have much hair, period. Yeah. I can tell you that.
Yeah, but you don't have much gray hair, really. I mean, for your age, not much gray hair.
What everybody tell. I guess my grandmother, Laughery, that was Sarah Wagama, I think her hair was just black, and it was cold the day she died, and she was 75. I was thinking about that 75 when I was in the hospital. She had pneumonia, and I guess that's what they put down for me: pneumonia and gallstones and enlarged heart, anemic, and they just really threw the book at me.
Now, how old will you be next birthday?
76.
Do you still play the piano?
Oh, some. I spent a lot of time here playing over old numbers and church music especially. I did play for the men's class when I was still attending Sunday school, when Mrs. Orville Jones has played for them for years, and then when she wasn't there, after I started back, I'd go play for them.
Since this tape will probably, your grandchildren listen to it or something like that, and I've never done this before, would you mind playing something for the tape? Something that's your favorite of yours?
You mean church song?
What is your favorite song of any of them?
Eddie and I started to go together. Beautiful Ohio was about the first piece we ever played together.
Yeah. You still play by sight? You don't?
Oh, no, I have to have my music.
I don't know how this is going to come out, but we'll try it.
Excuse me. This is going to be a flop, I'm afraid.
Don't worry about it.
Tune, I know that.
Well, let's hear Beautiful Ohio then. If that's the first song that you two played when you courted, huh?
Oh, let's play Memories. That's pretty.
Memories, I like that also. You and Eddie used to play this together?
Yeah, and I had have him play at Eddie's funeral.
Well, you had this played at his funeral also. Well, that's...
Yeah, this line especially. O'er the sea of memory, I'm drifting back to you. Then down here, you left me alone, but still you're my own in my beautiful memories.
Excuse me, I didn't hear what you said.
I say, this is such a pretty piece that he brought home one time after he'd been gone. And I always thought it was so pretty.
What's the name of it?
Love's Rosary.
All right.
The words to it. First she's a babe in the cradle, then a child at her dear mother's knee, and her pearls are the tears she may shed through the years of the coming years to be. As she grows older, she's counting life's beads and learning her destiny. And later in life, she's a true, loving wife and mother that's love's rosary.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I love
This is George Dingledye from the Wabash Carnegie Public Library.